don't want to do this. Talk about astronomy and other types of things under the current circumstances. It's really hard to prepare for it. But, Monty, you have given me no choice. We are here, and so I have to respond to you.
Yes, well, unless you are living under a rock, we went to war again over the weekend against Iran, and we're here for some kitchen table astronomy with Hampshire College astronomer from Kainaat Studios, Dr. Salman Hamid, Mr. Universe. The irony is not lost on me either about how much the space programs of old and the Cold War tie into the war making of now. The whole nuclear discussion is a space age discussion. A lot of what went into the Apollo program, our missions to the moon, was a deterrent, an obfuscation of what was actually going on. So to show our scientific might, in light of the fact that humans have created weapons that could destroy all of humanity in a breath. I don't think Iran has created any of those weapons, and I was told by the current Oval Office that their weapons program was destroyed over the summer, but somehow they were moments away from creating a nuclear program that was going to be very dangerous, and the Board of Peace decided to go and attack another country over the weekend. As Saturday Night Live said, the Board of Peace must have been Board of Peace and decided they were going to attack another country. Nevertheless, there are bigger things in the universe than this small temporal time frame we live in, and we can observe some of those things.
Right. So before I do want to talk about what to do, how to think, how to move, sort of like, and can astronomy give you any hope and stuff? And in fact, when I was thinking about it, this was sort of like between hope and despair.
Yeah.
Or the other way around, between despair and hope, because despair is not the so difficult part. It's the hope part that actually becomes more difficult. But for those who are interested, there is a total lunar eclipse, which is on in our area, Western Mass, early Tuesday morning. So the moon would have gone into partial eclipse around 10 to 5, basically. And the total eclipse here would be around at a little after 6, so 6:04. And soon after, it's...
Wait, so 6:04 tomorrow morning?
Tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
And it's...
won't it be too bright to see it?
Well, it's going to be... The moon will set very soon after, so you have to have to the west a clear horizon so that you can actually see it. So it's kind of cool. And then it's going to go below the horizon, I think around 6:20, a little after that. So,
but if you wake up early and see it when it's dark out, it will be
it will
partially
eclipsed. It will be partially eclipsed, but the totality starts at 6:04.
Okay.
And around 6:20 it will be below the horizon, unless you go up Holyoke Range or some higher place. Then you can see a little bit longer. And the total eclipse in general ends around 7 o'clock. But of course, if it's below the horizon, it doesn't matter to us. So that said, I think I do want to talk about what to do in some sense, I'm not saying anything new. This is a war of choice made by, if you think about, who should be making choices? Some of the individuals who, under normal circumstances, are under various clouds of controversies, all the way from President Trump to Netanyahu to Saudi Crown Prince, for example. They all have been... accused or they all have been under shadow for various kinds of actions, which for most people, they will find it unseemly. Mm-hmm. And they are the ones who have made a decision of taking us into a war of choice.
Yes, we should mention some of these things are not limited to, but may include pedophilia, genocide, the assassination of journalists, things of that nature.
So that's what I just wanted to mention, sort of like, so even if you think about, it's a war of choice, but choice of whom? And these are the individuals that we are dealing with. At least with a congressional approval, you can actually blame a larger body who have taken a decision, but not in this particular case. So coming from Pakistan, we have seen the other side of it, especially the destabilization of Afghanistan, which is still playing out right now. Pakistan actually bombed in Afghanistan a couple of days ago. So that's a whole other story, which is not on the main pages. But of course, Iraq with mission accomplished of President Bush and so on and so forth. So we have been living through that turbulent time, and the turbulence seems to be increasing. If we were on an airplane right now, they would have definitely asked us to, fasten the seatbelts and probably get your barf bag ready. Okay, so we are in this thing. So what do you do? I mean, there is a sense of powerlessness because we don't have, in some sense, decisions in our hands, although public power is extremely crucial.
There were a bunch of protests, even locally, yesterday, throughout the valley.
Which is important. But it's also important to, you get up in the morning and say, okay, so you need to be motivated. So I was thinking about how to think about it. And one of the things is that, in some sense, we are not alone. And not just in terms of contemporary aspects, but also in terms of great literature, be it novels or films and other things. One, however you want to think about it, property of humans in some sense has been that they've been doing these kind of things since I think humans have been around.
Yeah.
And this battle between despair and hope, I think that has been going on as long as humans have been around. And that's the reason why there is good literature to reflect on that and to play how do you deal with these kind of injustices, these kind of actions of tyrants, of dictators, and so on and so forth. And science fiction in particular is also really good at imagining these things. So for me, one of the places when things like this happens is to go toward science fiction. And of course, there is great science fiction all the way from Dune, again, which is a novel, but also movies.
And about empire and genocide.
And about a space dictator.
Right.
And so...
It's not just sandworms.
Spoiler alert, I should have said, but no, people should know about that. And or Handmaid's Tale, for example.
Yeah.
And so 1984.
Right. I'm about to start the second book in the Isaac Asimov series Foundation later today. So yeah, this will be a way to take a glimpse of what's going on in real time through a lens of imagination and fantasy and hope.
And also, we mentioned a few weeks ago the new Star Trek series, Starfleet Academy, which I think, especially the newest episode, so the 8th episode has been out, and I think it's fantastic, and it deals with some of these things, but again, without giving any spoilers, do watch it. I think it's capturing some of the philosophical underpinnings of the original Star Trek and Next Generation. And I think in terms of sophisticated storytelling, especially episode 8, I think it also matches some of the best episodes in the Next Generation.
I'm only on episode 5, so don't ruin anything.
I'm not going to ruin. Monty, you are so lucky. I was just this close. But here is the thing. But how do we think in terms of astronomy? And of course, one of the most famous passages to write about this was by Carl Sagan in Pale Blue Dot, in which he reflected on the image of Earth taken when Voyager 2 spacecraft passed by Neptune. And Carl Sagan actually requested NASA to actually turn back and look at the Earth. And that was unusual at the time. And it was, I think, 1990 that, okay, why do you want to turn back and look at, the Earth? And what his point was that we should always think about, this is a human achievement, but what do we see from there? And it was a pixel. It was a dot. And so there were his reflections, which if you haven't, I'm pretty sure you have, but if you haven't, do check those out. But in there, one of the things that he said, I think that was a big part of that, was in which he says, and I'm quoting Carl Sagan regarding that Earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors, so that, in glory and in triumph, they could become the momentary masters of the fraction of a dot. And really, in some sense, you can think about this cosmic perspective, as Carl Sagan would say, where you have these wars undertaken by various people, and you feel good about it, and you go like, hey, we won the war, or we destroyed so and so forth, and you bring in misery and all of that stuff, and triumph too, but for what, right? I mean, so there is this element that astronomy provides you with this perspective of how small we are. But I would like, and so this is where I would recommend two things for people to do when we are dealing with this between despair and hope. How do we turn around the corner? Because I think there is a part. This is true, what Carl Sagan wrote, but there is also this element of the pain of individuals. Yes, this cosmic perspective is correct on the large scale, but there is also the reality of pain that individuals have to endure and suffering that comes from these actions. And I think that is also on a human scale, that is also crucial. And for that, I would recommend a movie, documentary that came out, I think around 2010 or 2011. It's called Nostalgia for the Light. It's one of my favorite documentaries. It's by a Chilean director, Patricio Guzmán, who was famous. His famous movie was documenting the coup of the Chilean dictator Auguste Pinochet. That was called A Battle for Chile. And as it turns out, it happens to be the case that Patricio Guzmán, the filmmaker, he's an avid amateur astronomer. He loves astronomy. And Chile, as Monte, you and I have talked about, it's spectacular for astronomy. Atacama Desert, which is extremely dry. It is in the Andes. It's beautiful for astronomy. It's an ideal place, and that's why there are a lot of observatories, including a lot of American observatories, are there. And so this particular documentary talks about astronomy. It's a nostalgia for the light. I mean, because astronomy is all about the past, because of the time that light takes to get to us. And astronomers are trying to piece together our own past, our own origins, by looking at the light coming from stars and galaxies. But a lot of the history, a lot of the past is also preserved in the desert, including there is a history of poor mining conditions of laborers over there in Atacama Desert, but also Auguste Pinochet, the dictator. He actually killed a lot of people, and their bodies were dismembered and then spread out in the desert. And so those are called the disappeared. And there are women in Chile looking for the remains of those that were killed, because they scoured through the desert. They look for their remains. And so they are also trying to piece together the past. And so this documentary, it is a beautiful, first of all, beautifully shot documentary. It also interviews astronomers who are working at telescopes, piecing together the past, but also these women that are there, and also these prisoners in the concentration camps made by Auguste Pinochet. And some of those survived or maintained their sort of like senses by looking up at the sky, by looking up at the stars. So the movie, I mean, I think it actually does a great job of looking at the actions of tyrants and dictators, which actually may seem senseless, again, in the cosmic perspective, but the movie does a great job of acknowledging the pain experienced by the victims, because that is also real. So that is, again, nostalgia for the light. I think it is available for streaming on Prime Video or other places. So if you get a chance, it's a spectacularly beautiful documentary, and it connects the big themes with individuals and other things. So it's to me, that's the best example of being in between despair and hope.
Meanwhile, if you want to connect to the greater things of the universe and recognize that when there are astronauts on the International Space Station and they look at us down on Earth, that we're living a lie, that we have borders that separate all of us, that we are fundamentally different. No, we're all part of this community. We can look from here up, and tomorrow night into tomorrow morning, a full lunar eclipse and an alignment of planets in the sky as well.
Yeah, I mean, right now, a couple of days ago, in fact, it was the best place when you could even see Mercury there.
Which you can rarely see, is usually very close to the horizon, but was observable.
Was observable. So the second thing that I want to point out is something that you can go out and see at nighttime. All you have to do is just walk out, look towards the west, and you will see this amazing constellation, Orion. And in there, I mean, if you look at the stars, like the orange star, Betelgeuse, well, that's about 600 light years away, meaning to say when you're looking at it, the light started way before Trump. Way before, so it's 600 years it has taken to us. But what I would like you to imagine and focus, and this is something that I try to do, that, whenever I go out, yesterday was trash day, my favorite time, just to go out when you're taking trash, look up, because you want to be distracted also.
Yeah.
But just imagine the scales. So just below the 3 stars of the belt of Orion, there is a little cluster of stars, and you cannot see it without a telescope, but there is a Orion nebula there. This is about 1,500 light years from us, meaning to say when you are looking at it, the light that is coming from it, it has taken about 1,500 years to get to us. But that is a place where a lot of young stars are forming. It's a beautiful place. So look at sort of like pictures of it on the internet, but when you go out, imagine that is what you are seeing. And in that nebula, we expect sort of like overall the Orion complex, there are close to about 1,000 new stars are forming. So those are baby stars.
1,000 stars forming a day, or how?
No, right now in this whole nebula. And some of them are sort of like, the youngest ones are a few tens of thousands of years old. And the oldest one in this star forming region, the oldest ones are a few million years old, about 10 to 15 million with an M. Now, this is a kind of place where our sun formed. But we can see this place where eventually you will have stars, and we know there are planets that are being forming as well, but very, very early. And eventually, we expect there will be planets, maybe there'll be life, maybe it will evolve into complex life forms, maybe it will evolve into some sort of intelligence, and maybe over there is also going to be sort of like, tyranny, or we don't know, or there will be people struggling with despair and hope. But when you look at it, in some sense, it gives you, again, a perspective that all you have to do is just look up and see that this is a whole place where thousands of stars are forming, and each star will have planets, and each star will take billions of years, potentially, to have complex life forms. And then you can come back and look at the news. And it gives you a little bit of pause, a little bit of hope, a little bit of sort of like, thinking that, well, there are these individual things, but then ultimately we are also in a large cosmic sort of like, arena, as Carl Sagan called it. And in some ways, it reminds me a little bit like of being a toddler. Like, that here we have, we can do all of our tantrums and all of those things, but ultimately there is a lot more going on, and there is a much bigger universe, and we are just really toddlers making noises.
Avoid the lunatics and spend more attention and pay more attention to the lunar eclipse. Maybe.